Testimony, we'll start a round of 5-minute questions, and let me make some prefatory remarks before I go to my questions here. I'm all in and have been since 2014 when I, waved my saber and said we should be far more responsive to the invasion of Crimea because it was the warning sign. And the world, including the United States, was relatively mute in its response to the invasion annexation of Crimea. And so then Putin got the message that you can march on. And that's part of what's at stake now, that he can march on. Now, there are those I know who have an insular view and others who have a legitimate question. And as someone who, back at home in New Jersey, when I'm asked by my constituents, why are we spending so much money on Ukraine? I make the point to them that, in fact, what is at stake is not only the Ukrainians' freedom, which in and of itself is important, but also the proposition that you cannot by force take another country's territory. Because if that can become the rule of the day, there are many despots and authoritarians who will seek to do that. China in Taiwan, North Korea possibly against South Korea, the list is endless. But having said that, I would commend to you, Madam Secretary, to speak to the Secretary and to the administration, that I think it's important that we articulate what is our definition of victory and what is the blueprint for victory in order to continue to have the bipartisan support of Congress for the resources that will be necessary to achieve that victory. I think that's critically important. Not saying that we don't have one, but it hasn't been well articulated if there is one. And if there isn't a full vision of what that blueprint is, we should be thinking about what it is and how we execute on it. With that, and we also, I'm a strong supporter, I have voted for everything for the Ukrainians and passed legislation going back to 2014. But we also have to tell our friends in Ukraine, you can't sell white phosphorus to the Azerbaijanis that kill Armenians. There are responsibilities as well, not just the opportunity to receive resources. My first question is about sanctions, and it is particularly about China. As you well know, President Putin met with Chinese President Xi Jinping in February of 22, where they touted their no-limits partnership, just weeks before Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Since that time, I understand there's been evidence that Chinese companies, including working through Hong Kong, have been exporting dual-use technologies, including semiconductor chips, which are critically important to fill in, particularly on missile guidance systems, that Russia needs to continue its onslaught of Ukraine. It seems to me that we should not forsake the potential of sanctions against China if it is providing critical assistance. And it shouldn't be able to hide behind some companies. Have we raised these concerns at the highest levels of the Chinese government? Is this support from China to Russia not a direct violation of U.S. sanctions?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and for your strong personal support for Ukraine and your perfect articulation of what's at stake here, which the President agrees with, as he said yesterday. With regard to China, yes, from well before this latest invasion began, in November and December even of 21, we began an intense conversation with China at every level, which the President himself has led, and all of our senior leaders have been involved in, with regard to their relationship with Russia and about their own interests, in our view, in upholding the UN Charter and not allowing Putin-style rules of the road to dominate. And we've made clear that we will bring to their attention when we see sanctions violations by their companies. And we've been very clear with regard to the impact on our relationship and their standing in the world.
I just don't think that we have followed up those conversations with robust sanctions against companies that are providing dual-use technology that is allowing the Russians to continue to have access to missile capabilities that we should not let them have. It seems
Chairman,
to
I
me
would
that,
just-
you know, we need to, in addition to all the money that we are providing, all the you know, defense equipment we're providing, we need to cut the head of the snake off in every way we can. And that means sanctioning it directly and its inner core, which I give the administration credit for, but it also means sanctioning those vigorously who are assisting Russia in this unjust and unholy war. And so I hope we will be far more robust in that regard. I don't care that it's China, I don't care who it is. At the end of the day, they cannot act with impunity and face no consequence.
We agree with that, Chairman, and we have a new set of sanctions out today, which I think you will see some of the things that you've been calling for.
I look forward to that.
Particularly with regard to.
I don't know if you're familiar directly with what I mentioned in my opening statement about the Magnitsky letter on Vladimir Kara-Murza. It is past the time statutorily to get an answer. I see no reason why, in fact, we cannot, in essence, have sanctions against someone who's one of Russia's biggest critics, Putin's biggest critics, not Russia's biggest critics, Putin's biggest critics, and is jailed as a result of it. We should make it clear through Magnitsky sanctions. Senator Cardin's been the author of that law. This is an example of what it was meant to use. And so, could you get us an answer, please?
We're not only going to get you an answer, we're going to get you Magnitsky sanctions in very short order.
Bravo, bravo, bravo. All right, now, lastly, you know, what are we doing as it relates to the need for, some of us went to The Hague earlier last year to press the case on sanctions and prosecutions against those who are committing war crimes. There must be accountability, and accountability without prosecutions is not accountability. Are we focused on that as well?
We are, Chairman. We have a G7 working group of lawyers as well as the group of G7 political directors that I'm involved in looking at various models of accountability. There are 3 or 4 under consideration. I think we'll have more to say about that as we approach the anniversary in terms of the actual setting up of judicial proceedings. But in the meantime, and Aaron can speak to this in more detail, we are involved in supporting all kinds of accountability mechanisms on the ground in Ukraine, everything from collecting evidence to supporting the cataloging of atrocities, et cetera. And we're working with the Ukrainians on some interim measures of registries of attack, et cetera, that could be used for future accountability. I don't know if Erin has anything she wants to add there.
Thank you, Senator. We are working very closely on the ground through our human rights and access to justice centers that have a network throughout Ukraine, over 22 locations, to gather and document the evidence for such time to be able to, as you said, prosecute and hold accountable those actions inside Ukraine. So we aren't waiting for the determination for that process to be set up, but preparing all we can so that when it is in place, swift and appropriate due process can be made and the evidence is available.
The earlier that possible prosecutions are prosecuted and successfully done will send a chilling effect to those who think they can act with impunity. Senator Risch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Nuland, what you said there are going to be new sanctions out today.